We are joined by Stephan Blanford, who's running for school board position 5. So go ahead with a 2-minute introduction.
Okay. I am Stephan Blanford, and I am running for school board Seattle position 5, which is the International District, Capitol Hill, Central District, and parts of downtown, the southern part of downtown. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to speak to the 36th District. I enjoyed going to the meeting last week, and I'm really excited about running for school board. In spite of what you may have read in the paper yesterday about the school board being, in Seattle being maybe the worst job that, I think someone said it was the worst job that you could have in Seattle. I don't actually see it as that. The article made mention of the fact that it's an uncompensated position, and I do note that fact, and it is a pretty serious hardship, maybe the wrong word, but a draw on my family. But as someone who has benefited greatly from having access to high quality public education, my family is a family that was in the depths of generational poverty for years and years and years and generations. And because my mom and dad gave us access to high quality public education, I've benefited greatly. My siblings have benefited greatly, and my cousins have benefited. And I feel a responsibility to give back if possible. I went back to school and got a doctorate in education, leadership, and policy studies with the idea that I would be able to amplify what I know and be able to help make the provision of public education more accessible for students like me. And so I'm really excited, like I said again, to have the opportunity to share my positions on issues with you.
Great, thank you. I think we left off, David, will you do question number 1? These are 2-minute answers.
Is there a tense issue with this?
Go ahead and read it as written.
Thank you.
Arguable whether they have or not.
Assuming the legislature actually increases funding for Seattle Public Schools in response to the McCleary decision, what are your priorities for spending the money?
I think that's a great question. I have been on the campaign trail basically sharing the idea that it will be a while before we see that money, and I hope that we actually see that money during the term of service that hopefully I get elected, and during the 4 years that I'm in office, that we'll actually see some of that additional funds coming into classrooms. I will tell you that there are a number of states that have identical laws on the book, or identical judicial rulings on the book, and have the same type of language around the paramount duty of state government is to provide public education. And New Jersey is an example. 10 years from the date that they actually got their ruling is when they finally started to get some revenue and additional revenue in the door. So I'm not looking at it like it's going to be a quick infusion of cash coming in, but to answer your question, I believe that we need to be critically focused on sending that money into classrooms, and that we need to prioritize a number of different issues. I think the achievement gap in Seattle is atrocious, and I think it's something that needs to be addressed. There are a number of other issues. I think our special education program, a lot of the findings that we've had in the past have been driven by the fact that there hasn't been sufficient funding to support the needs of the kids that are in special education. I think we need to be intentional about that. We have some capacity issues, particularly in the north end, that need to be resolved, and I'm not saying that those dollars coming in are going to go to capital projects, because I don't believe that they will, but there's a whole gamut of potential places where that revenue can fall.
Okay, John, number 2.
In your view, what is the appropriate role of the school board in determining curriculum? And what is your opinion on the current curriculum?
The current curriculum, very broadly.
Very broadly.
Okay, the school board's role is to set policy, to hire and fire the superintendent and to supervise the superintendent, to set a policy framework that allows the staff to do their work, perform their mission, to advocate for the community to the school district, and to take information from the school district back into the community. Those are the primary responsibilities of the school board. There has been a lot of debate about whether or not school boards should actually be involved in curricular decisions. And the primary driver of that, the primary reason for that conflict is curricular decisions curriculum can be a very complex process. And if you have volunteers who have a limited amount of time, do they have enough knowledge to oversee one curriculum over another? We have, in the past, we've had school boards who have been in that, who have chosen to be involved in that, and in other times they've chosen to defer to a group of people, teachers and administrators and some parents and community groups, to make a recommendation which they've overseen. The appropriate balance, in some ways I think I have some advantages that some other school boards may not have. I've spent the last 10 years at the University of Washington looking at curricula and making determinations about what makes sense and what doesn't. But as an entire body, I'm not quite sure. I'll know more once I become a school board member.
Thank you.
And I'm not sure if I answered the last part of your question, so given the opportunity, I'll come back to it.
Thank you.
John, number
What is your outreach strategy to make the district and its schools more approachable for non-English speaking families?
That's a great question, and I'm really glad that you asked it. In a prior job, a few years ago, my role was, I was the manager of community and government relations for the Alliance for Education. And in that role, I had responsibility for outreach to community groups across the city. And in the past, we had not had very deep relationships with our ethnic families. And I saw that as a responsibility that, though no one was telling me I needed to do it, I felt like I needed to do it. I felt like their voices were not the voices that were heard frequently at school board meetings, not heard at director meetings. The staff of the district frequently didn't hear from those groups, and I thought they had a critical role to play. And so there were a number of nascent groups that were just kind of forming in their forming process, and I got the opportunity to work with a number of them and kind of bring them up, drive some funding to them so they could kind of coalesce and get their 501c3s and all the rest. My strategy is to not only to have meetings and have them come to me, but to figure out ways to be invited to events that they're holding where there's the opportunity for give and take and flow of information to go backwards and forwards.
Okay. Clayton, number 4.
In your view, what should the school board be doing to assure equal educational and achievement opportunities at Seattle Public Schools?
What should the school board be doing towards that end? I take from that question that you're asking about, in some ways, about the achievement gap, and I'll respond to it in that way. I have made my campaign in large measure. I believe that a school board member has lots of responsibilities, but my primary reason for running is when I look at the data and I see achievement rates that are so far distant from one another, and those are based largely on race, I have a serious concern about that. I know that with public education being the bedrock of democracy, I know that if we're not serving our students of color well, then that has implications for their future and for society's future. And so I believe that the school board has to set the appropriate policy framework so that teachers and administrators can begin to address that issue and know that the school board not only wants them to do that, but expects them to do that. I think in my professional work, I work with teachers and administrators around this issue, and frequently, we have to put on the table race, and we're all uncomfortable talking about race. But in order to resolve some of these issues, we have to actually put race on the table and have rich, thorough conversations that are sometimes uncomfortable for people. But once we were able to have those conversations and get past the rancor and the difficulty that people have engaging on that issue, then we can actually move forward to bring this more into balance, the achievement of all students into balance. And so I think the school board plays a critical role in setting the policy framework and then saying it's not only okay, but we insist, this community insists that we begin to address this issue.
Jack, number 5.
Last year, voters approved Initiative 1240, which allows the establishment of charter schools. What impact will this have on Seattle public schools, and how should the school board respond?
The school board has taken an opinion or a position on this issue that they're not in support of charter schools. And I've been on record as being in opposition to charter schools. I know that there are other districts in the state that are moving forward with charter school legislation and actually chartering nonprofit organizations to create charter schools. And, based on my background, my academic background, I have researched charter schools which actually are doing really good work for students, resolving achievement gaps, raising student achievement for all students across all segments of the population. And so, though I have been in opposition to charter schools and probably will maintain my opposition to charter schools, I recognize that there are some benefits that come with them.
So now we'll open it up to follow-up questions from the executive board. These are 1-minute answers. So Sean, Mary, and then David, and then Clayton.
1-minute answers?
1-minute answers.
You referred to bedrock of democracy, and I really like that. And one thing that's happening is that the amount of testing they're doing is focusing instruction so much on English and math that civics have been omitted in PE and recess for elementary kids. On the other hand, you referred to data and the importance of data. So how do you find a balance, and how should the district find a balance between getting data and these other purposes of education that are being pretty much ignored these days?
Well, I think that's a two-part question, actually, because data is one thing, and gathering data on student achievement and student progress, is an essential element of what we're taught in school. Is that in order for us to move student achievement forward, we have to instruct well, and then we have to measure that instruction to see who's not being instructed well, who's not learning, and then we have to learn how to tailor our instruction so that all students are being served. That can only happen through the collection of some data. I would say that the school district has not chosen the right measures in some cases. I think the conversation about the MAP test at Garfield High School is indicative of the fact that the test may have not been the right test to use. And so I think we have to be very intentional, and I think we need to have school board members who have enough knowledge about what's the appropriate assessment tool to be able to use in order to make things work better.
David, and then Clayton, and Elizabeth.
Earlier, I think it was in question number 2 about curriculum, and what was your opinion on the current curriculum, and you said that you had not had an opportunity to fully address the second half of that question, and given the opportunity, You would?
Mhm.
So I'd like to give you that
Okay.
opportunity.
Can you remind me again of the second part of the question?
So if I'm remembering correctly, question 2, in your view, what is the appropriate role of the school board in determining curriculum? And what is your opinion on the current curriculum? And I think you had opportunity in the time frame to talk about the board's role, and I don't think you fully addressed, in your mind, the current curriculum.
Yeah, and my struggle with that is that the current curriculum is a huge range. I think if you look at the data, if you look at student achievement data, and I'm thinking primarily of the data that you can get on the OSPI website, you're seeing progress by and large in most sectors: 3rd grade, 8th grade, 10th grade, math, science, English, reading and writing. You're seeing gradual progress. And in my mind, curriculum that results in the slope of the line going upwards is curriculum that makes sense. I think in the past in Seattle, there has been some desire for individual communities to determine the type of curricula that they want to teach in their particular schools. And I think the struggle is, Maria Goodloe-Johnson talked about this a lot. Sorry, I'm running out of time.
Very deep questions for 1 minute.
Yeah,
Um,
my apologies.
Clayton and then Elizabeth.
My question is a follow-up on both number 2 and number 4.
Okay.
In that, I'm concerned about what happens when kids get to the 9th grade and somebody says to them, well, you're just average. So no AP for you. We have something that's not too hard. You'll be okay. You'll have a nice average experience here. I'm very concerned about that kind of statement to kids, because nobody would have made that to me in the 9th grade. Because I had a choice as to whether to take the academic curriculum or not. Students don't have an AP choice if somebody says they're not ready. So
Right. I think that's a great concern, and I agree with it. If someone were to come to me when I was a 9th grader and say, your past record indicates that you're not going to be college material, they have low expectations. And low expectations, what we're taught in the business is that low expectations end up in low results. You know, the self-fulfilling prophecy. There are a number of high schools now that are pushing IB or AP programs and trying to insist that every kid in that school have at least one experience in one of those classes to see what the rigor is and to see what the support around that rigor so they can actually be successful in those. And I support that notion because my own personal experience, and I believe the experience of many people like me, is that once you get into one of those classes and discover this is rigorous, but I can do the work, then it changes that self-fulfilling prophecy to something that actually can be success over a course of a long career.
Last question, Elizabeth.
Okay, so regarding charter schools, only a small percentage of charter schools have been found to outperform public schools. The majority sort of meet the same quality or fall below the quality. So given that, would you vote for the board to become a charter authorizer if funding were available? So who do you think should be the authorizer of charter schools?
Who should be? I think it's a local decision that should be made, and the Washington State has authorized communities to make that choice, and some have chosen to make that choice, or some are moving down the road towards making
But
that choice.
the individual charter, like nonprofit.
To my knowledge, it's mostly nonprofits that have applied to be
So
charter
you think
schools.
as a school board member, you should be able to choose which nonprofits get that approved charter?
Yes. If Seattle were to become a charter school to allow charters, I think the school board, it would be our accountability to the community to make the final determination who gets a charter and who doesn't. Yes. But I should repeat again that I'm not for charters.
Great, so we're out of time. If you'll take 30 seconds for a closing statement. I know it flies, 20 minutes flies when you're having fun.
It did go by really fast. I really appreciate the depth of thought that went into your questions. There have been times that I've gotten questions that I've left from the room and I've thought, these questions do not rise to the level of the seriousness that we're talking about. One of the things that I hope, if I become a school board member, is to elevate the conversation. I think one of the struggles with our school board right now, the reason it's perceived as dysfunctional, is we get caught in this trap of thinking that things are either yes or no, and there's a lot more complexity to almost any issue that we're dealing with right now. So I appreciate the thought that you put into these questions ahead of time.
Great, thank you very much.